Sure. I'm sure Rob is going to share a bit about that with you guys. We did send some students on after the Blue Book program to a League of Innovators program. Actually, Sam completed the program in the fall. And we've talked about Sam Yazinski and FinTrack app. So I'm going to actually hand it over. Now, Rob is based in Calgary, and hand it over to Rob to take us through today's session.
Awesome. Thanks, Cecile. Great to meet you all. It seems like got a bit of a smaller group today, so I'm excited to kind of like dive into some of the details of solutions interviews and some of our experiences working with hundreds of youth entrepreneurs across all of Canada and every sector. And we have some examples that we have from actual entrepreneurs doing like real companies like across Canada led by youth raising money, like and hiring teams and kind of how it applies to this is we always like to look at like the applied side of all of the topics that we cover and give you real examples from real youth entrepreneurs like Sam and what it looks like in as a youth founder in Canada today. So similar to Cecile, we like to start off with a land acknowledgement with all of our sessions. So I'd like to acknowledge that I carry my work with the League of Innovators on the traditional territories of the Black Confederacy, which is the Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, and the Tsuut'ina, as well as the Stoney Nakoda Nations in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. So purpose of today is covering like what are some solution interviews and why should you care? I always like to start sessions with this because if I don't convince you why you should care before I start talking, it's probably won't like land much of it. So my first goal is to convince you that you should care about what these are and how to do them if you want to build a successful venture. And then we're going to look at what the connections are between solution interviews and validation and the importance of invalidation and where that comes up. And then some processes and tools you can look at to do these, as well as, if we have time, discuss listening and what active listening is, because it's a key component of doing just like good interviews and a tool to help build a habit of that. So before we begin on the content, I'll tell you a little bit about LOI, or the League of Innovators. We are Canada's leading like founder accelerator for youth entrepreneurs. So what I mean by that is our focus is on you as the founder. We really focus on setting them up for success. We're not going to tell you how to fix your car. We want to make you a better mechanic. That's like the approach that we take. We are sector and model agnostic. And so because of that, we have founders coming from all walks of life, working on different businesses at different stages, and we're able to support them as entrepreneurs. And so one way I like to think of this is like, think of LOI as the book club, not the book. All right. So we're not like experts in any theory or AI or the next like venture. We don't have in-house expertise on those. We have a lot of contacts who might be able to help with specific questions because sometimes that's needed. But we really focus on like providing a space for entrepreneurs to, especially youth entrepreneurs across Canada, to come and talk about what they're learning, what the challenges are they facing, and how are other founders dealing with these challenges in the applied side of what they're doing. And so it's not so much frameworks and lectures, but it's more a lot of what we do is conversational and ask me anythings and huddles and things like that. So if you're interested in learning more, you can always reach out to myself or Aaron, who's actually here today as well. So this is just this quick snapshot of our team. We have a team across Canada. And so on the bottom there, that's our acceleration team. We run our acceleration programming. Aaron is joining us today. Kyle and myself kind of run the three programs. We all have entrepreneurial experience as youth entrepreneurs ourselves. So we have that insight into what that's actually like. And then we have Cliche and Simran, who just joined our team to do some community engagement and start to really activate our community across Canada, which is over 1,000 founders from the last few years. So yeah, some just quick numbers. This doesn't include our 2022 numbers yet. We haven't finished collecting all of our data for it, but at the end of 2021, we'd worked with over 12,000 youth across our different programs, over 250 startups. 870 million enterprise value collected, and then online learners through our Innovators Academy. And I can tell you this, that the one number that we were like excited to cross last year is that the enterprise value created by some of our founders that have come through our programs is like actually increased to over $1 billion, which is a nice milestone for us as an organization, and shows the impact that youth entrepreneurs have in Canada. And so some of our most like famous ones, you might heard of Smart Sweets, which is those like sugarless gummies. You see them in like every grocery store. Tara was one of our OG founders. And so yeah, that's a bit about us. Some quick things to know. So sorry, last one is like, well, we're youth focused, so between 15 and 30. All of our programs are free and require no equity, which it really sets us apart from a lot of other accelerators. Similar to what LOI does. And then, yeah, you get connection to a Canadian-wide ecosystem, as well as like, yeah, we're really focused on the founders and supporting them wherever they're at to become the best entrepreneur they can. So if you're ever interested in a little more, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to work with you. So before we start, I'd love to check in with the founders that are here. So it's kind of hard to see on my screen, but Angela, and we got like Marie, Thomas, and Sean. Just like, can you just give me a quick snapshot of like, what are some of the interviewing that you've like passed, and like what was your experience with it? So maybe we'll start with Angela. Can't hear you. Mute.
You're on mute, Angela.
Yeah, happens every day in our sessions.
Sorry about that. But I've done a few prospective interviews with clients.
Okay.
Because I'm currently working on developing an MVP. And so right now my focus is on figuring out like what the customer problem is and like how I can fix that.
Okay, and what's the problem quickly that you're trying to solve?
Well, mine's going to be like a technology-based company. So I'm trying to create like a new like blockchain network, but I want to like integrate it with quantum computing.
Okay, very cool industries. Sean, how about you?
Hi. Mine are kind of just like, it's not very like, I haven't really the problem is more like I'm trying to help give more kind of like show people's products more with using like drones. So the stuff I'm doing is like seeing why they would want it, or like if there's any other different ways, like trying to find out that can help them. It's not like concrete yet, but still working on it.
Gotcha. No worries. How about you? Is Thomas, are you available to share what you've been working on? So take that as a no for now. But if you can come off, like let us know. And then Marie.
Hi there. I'm working with my brother on a project of tying digital blockchain assets to real world objects. And we've done a little bit of interviewing, but we're really kind of stuck on like who our target audience would be and what the like the scope of the objects and how they play into like people's businesses and also their hobbies, and just kind of, it's so vast that it's hard to pinpoint.
Awesome. Okay. Still in that early exploration stage. This is a really good stage to be in. Maybe if I was feeling more adventurous, I'd try this like whiteboard feature, because I have there's this really exciting process where like before you actually launch your business, you get to work on your business 100% of your time. And then once you launch, that number, if things go well, continues to go down and down and down. And then you continue to work for your business and not on your business. And that can be really challenging if you want to continue the momentum and the progress. So these earlier stages are really exciting because you're constantly making it like ideas and changing it and growing and doing that. I can tell you right now, like going into your customer, some of your customer interviews, is that you, like from the sounds of it, everybody here is working on pretty like technically advanced products. And so how you communicate learning how what words that you use, because you're gonna have to speak in a way that like everybody or most people with a general understanding of what these are, but like communicating the value to them in a way that makes sense, so without getting caught up in the weeds. Where we see a lot of founders, like the further they go down this path that you're on, and then they start applying to our programs, like when they describe their business, and when they try to like share what's a problem that they're solving, it gets way too technical and full of acronyms and things like that. And even though Aaron and I have like experience like in these areas, having worked with founders, we still need to push founders to like write it in a way that like somebody with a basic understanding of it would understand. And a key way to learn how to do that is through your customer interactions, like customer interviews, customer discovery work, solutions interviews, where you can propose different ways of how to communicate the value of what you're doing and the product and the problem or the pain point for them that you're going to solve, and figure out what resonates and what doesn't. So one little just little hack tip that we give entrepreneurs that seems to work really well is like record. It's really hard to have an organic conversation where somebody's going to give you like really good like insight into your product while like writing down specifically what they say. And so whenever you can, like whether it's an audio or like a recording, if you're doing a Zoom call, or if you're just sitting down for coffee, like record the conversation so that you can go back later, and when you ask certain questions for them to describe certain things, you can listen you can go back, and a really valuable thing to do is to listen to the exact words that they use, like the exact words and how they phrase it in different ways, because then that's how you can start to use that to communicate your products and use their own language. So just like a tip that we give founders is like to really, if you're ever pitching your business, or if you're ever like doing interviews or things like that, make sure you have a recording of it, at least an audio recording, specifically, so you can go back and like carefully look at how they describe certain problems and what words are they using, because generally those will be the words that'll resonate really substantially with that group or that target customer, especially when you're dealing with tech stuff. So you have to describe your product the way they understand it, not the way you understand it. And the way to do that is to use their language. So just as like a side piece on that's not in the slides, it's just something that we tell founders. So kicking off some of the slides. So the quote of the day is, this is one of my favorite quotes to tell entrepreneurs, is everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And it's a Mike Tyson quote, and I love it for this reason, because and why I chose this one for today is because a lot of founders they're just so excited to launch. You're fortunate enough to be in a program that like is showing you the benefit of things like problem and customer discovery, and like what is it, and how much value can you drive from it, and different things. A lot of founders don't have that, first time founders especially, and then they just really want to launch their business. They skip to that part, and then they realize a bunch of things that they'd assumed weren't actually accurate, and they learned a bunch of things the hard way, and I equivalent that to like being punched in the face. Being like, oh my God, everything that I thought was going to be successful, and all this work and time, effort, money, and resources I put into this are not going in the direction that I thought. And a lot of reasons is because they haven't talked to their customers yet. They hadn't done the work. And so I think I equate doing this work, customer problem discovery, is like kind of like your training, so that when you do get punched in the face, you can take it, and kind of just like you were kind of more expecting it, and you can move on. So just to start off things with kind of like a quote to stick with, maybe like leave you with today. But we'll quickly go over like a solution interview. Technical definition is it builds on this research understanding. So you've started doing your problem discovery work. You've probably done what we call secondary research, right? So you're reading a lot of stuff on Google, looking at reports, reading firsthand things, chat boards, Quora, Reddit, that kind of stuff can be a really good place to read people's information about describing certain issues that they're having and problems. We have a really successful founder who just spent 2 or 3 weeks reading Quora boards and Reddit boards, and that's where he got the idea for his business, because he just knew that was going to be it. So that's kind of stuff that you're doing, and seeing how, and then like getting to a point where you can then start to propose what you think a potential solution, or show a potential solution, and seeing how individuals react. And there's a bunch of different ways you can do it. So just a quick orientation around what is a solution. When we say a solution interview, what is that? And so what are the intended outcomes of this interview? Why should you care? I've shared a little bit about why you should care, but really what we really want at the end of this are things like actionable customer insights. So it's very different than, and I'll give examples about this at the end, but it's like you want customer insights that are actually going to help you make strategic decisions or improve your product. And so that's why I call them actionable insights. Telling me you're like, oh, they loved our product, like, and they want to use it is not an actionable. You can't do anything with that. That's not a good, right? Like, that's not gonna, you didn't actually learn anything from your customer that's going to help you like launch your business better. And so there's a key word there where it's like you're looking for actionable customer insights, things that are they tell you about customers and how they view your product or the problem that they're facing that can influence how you actually set up your service or your product. You want to look for things, insights on like the what. So that's like what, like your actual solution yourself, which is like, is your, like kind of like measuring or trying to test hypothesis around like, is your solution going to solve the problem, or does it, could your solution actually solve the problem? But then also how, right? Which is more human-centered design, which is you could have a product, like let's say you develop a product that is like perfectly like a solution to that person's problem, but it's like, you've ever heard of UX design or user experience design? It's like a huge booming thing in the tech industry. That's like the other half of it, because if people don't use your product effectively, it won't solve then it doesn't matter if it has the potential to solve the problem. If the how isn't good, then they're not going to be able to do it. And so you're looking for insights on those like two different types of insights. So it's like the actual solution itself, but then how you set it up or how you communicate it so that it, like founders or your customers like understand what you're doing and how to use it and to get that benefit. So there's like two different types of insights that you're looking for. And then a lot of it is just like just hypothesis validation, and like cover, like, we have these things called founder bias. Like everybody's blind spots. You ever seen a business and you're like, how does that exist? Like that makes no logical sense why that business is still in, because it's like their model just doesn't make sense to you because that's a blind spot. And then like trying to test these and see which ones are, so we'll talk more about that. But so yeah, that's why you should care, is that it can help you address all these things, reduce risk, and we'll kind of review this at the end, but it has a lot of positive effects that can save you a lot of time and money and headaches in the long run. That's the goal. Yeah, so at this point, there's two kind of elements just that you're dealing with. One is like the idea that you have, and now you're starting to like have it interact with the individual. So you're looking at now, it's like you've developed this idea, this thing, and now you're testing that and seeing if it'll actually work, right? So now you're like, this is external validation is what we call it, and like external validation is really important because like every founder thinks their idea is a great idea until they actually go to market with it. And then they realize like, oh, there may be a bunch of things I didn't think of, or it's not having the impact, or it's not resonating, or that problem wasn't as big as I thought, or people aren't willing to pay for it, whatever it might be. And so there's lots of really great examples of companies that should know better not doing this. One of them is Google Glass, which had, they had this idea of like what these problems were, and then they just never thought about how in reality people would actually use it and integrate it into their lives. And it was like, it was like unattractive, like people didn't want to wear it, right? Like all things they could have learned if they had like done proper testing and like and solutions interviews and that kind of stuff, and saved them millions, if not tens or hundreds of millions of dollars if you're doing this at Google scale. And it just seems like a really ridiculous step that they skipped, and why they wasted so much money on like this idea. So really what you're trying to do is avoid a lot of these. You can learn like running out of cash, failed raise capital, like that's generally personal runway related, right? Because building a startup can be really challenging that way. but you really want to understand, like, is there a market need out there? Like, is it actually going to solve the problem? It's the second most common reason businesses fail, and one of the ways to reduce this risk is through solution interviews. So yeah, you start to answer questions as you go through them, which is like, will it actually work? Will it have the intended impact that I wanted it to have? Like, what do I see that's working, what's not working, what are the strengths and weaknesses, right? What are, like, if you have like 4 or 5 different features and you see one of them work really well, maybe you lean into that one and you start with that one, and that's how you build some initial traction and growth, and kind of maybe leave the other ones behind. So it can really help you make actionable strategic insights, like actionable ones that you can actually do stuff with. The amount of founders, when we ask on our forms, which we ask on all of them, like, list your top 3 customer insights, and they say ridiculous things like, everybody loves our product. That's not what we were looking for. It just shows that they haven't done the work. And so you're really gonna, can go through this experience, this process of building and working on something, testing it, like then kind of going back to the drawing board, and kind of repeating that over time. So the process for doing this is important. I'm going to stop there, actually. I'll stop for a second and just say, like, does anybody have any questions, first of all, about anything that we've covered so far? Makes sense. Did you learn something new so far? Yeah? Okay. The next part is, so Aaron's heard me say this way too many times, but it's like, what gets measured gets managed, right? And so if you just go into these like without a plan, you don't really know like what's like successful or what's not successful if you're not looking to answer a specific question. And so you really need to identify, like, what is your intended learning or hypothesis or whatever it is that you're testing. Like, what is the focus of what you're doing before you do it, and not just go into this and be like, hey, here's my product, what do you think, right? And you won't get valuable insight. You're also got to deal with a challenge where it's like, it is really challenging to get good feedback, especially from friends and family, because people are really sensitive about each other's egos. And so my tip for there is to tell them at the start of your thing, you're like, feedback is my love language. I need your honest feedback. If you just tell me that you like my product, it's not going to help me. I need to know what you actually like and what you don't. If it's like a friends or family, or you don't think you're going to get that. And then go in it with like a clear idea of like what you're trying to get out of it. Because then you can actually like validate and test things, and have a bit of a process, and it can help you kind of narrow down into that time where you stop doing customer interviews and you actually focus on launching, because that's the time of like that point that you're trying to get to. And so that process looks like defining what it is, like, what do you actually want to learn, and being intentional about it. Because if you're intentional about it, you'll actually like stick to it. And then you want to map out assumptions and convert them into hypothesis. Just really, and then design, like, actually try to find different ways to test that and see if those tests are actually working. And then take everything that you've learned and just iterate and go back and do that. So step 1, define your focus. You can build a user journey map, right? And try to understand what, like, this is like part of like building a customer persona. Have you guys talked about that? Like, who your target customer might do, and what their day looks like, and what platforms are they use, and what stores are they at, and stuff like that, to really really understand like what your early adopters like are doing, and how you're gonna like interact with them, get their attention, and do that. It doesn't have to be intense, but you just want to like have an idea of like who you're targeting, and what it looks like. And over time, as you do these interviews and you learn more about who your customers are, and what are the actual problems, and what are their daily routines, and how does this problem show up in their life, you'll start to refine this down until you can really come into some actionable strategic insights that can help you make some really good decisions. And so that's kind of step 1, is be intentional, and design that. And step 2, of like, kind of going through your defining your focus, is like answering, kind of looking through these, like these are questions that can help you define it. So depending on where you are or what you think some of the key challenges are with your particular product or service, like, is your problem actually worth solving, right? Like, do people actually face this problem at the level that you are the people that you assume are facing this problem actually facing this problem? A lot of times what's really funny is like like startup founders will like launch a business with a certain idea of who their target customer is, and then if they're lucky, then they're wrong because they didn't do their customer discovery work, but then they actually find that it's like a completely other group of people that is actually buying and using their service and doing that, and they actually like pivot completely to this whole other customer group because they had to learn to understand like who actually is facing this problem at scale and in a specific way that their problem or solution can solve. A good one is that the one I was thinking there is like a meal prep company who thought like students were going to be their like target audience, but students don't have disposable income, so they weren't buying their like their prep meals. But then what they ended up finding was like moms of young families loved their products, and so instead of trying to do all this work at universities and campuses, they just like pivoted to go into like where moms hang out, and that's how they were able to get their customers. It's like understanding the problem he was clear on, which is like healthy stuff, kind of like a bridge between like chef's plate and the grocery store, where it's like they actually make the food for you, but it's like bigger amounts of it, like meal prep for you. And he knew kind of like the idea of like the problem, but he thought it was students that were facing that. They didn't have the time, but they also didn't have the money, and so it ended up being young moms that they grew and scaled it. So yeah, is your problem actually worth solving? Have you identified it accurately? And like, is it actually like going to solve the problem that people are facing? Again, what are like the key features of programs or things that are going to be needed for it to actually work? So which, if you have 3 or 4 features, some of them might actually really solve, a couple of them might, a couple of them won't. And then is there enough demand? And right, like the gap from getting somebody to pay nothing for a product, especially a tech product, if it's like a low like price tag tech product, getting somebody to pay $1 for something is like the gap from 0 to 1 is exponentially bigger than 1 to 10. It's like getting somebody to just pay for something, especially tech products, if it's like a lifestyle one or like a more of like a day-to-day. So trying to figure out how to actually get people to pay for things, especially tech products, is really challenging. So with that, you have your focus. You start to map out what are your examples of some assumptions that you're making. Financial training workshops change financial behavior, like podcasts can build a sense of community, like whatever you think are key assumptions that need to be true for your business model to be successful. And then you think of as many as you can. And then what you do is then you rank them as like, if this is wrong, I will completely fail and I will go nowhere, which is like critical assumptions, down to like, okay, if this was wrong, I thought it was true, but it's not really gonna have that big of an impact. And then you really want to focus on testing the critical ones. That's where you get your like key top 2 or 3 things that if like this is not true, it would have a drastic impact. People are willing to pay for this is a big one that a lot of founders don't think. Or if your product involves selling the data of the users of your product or ad spend, you're gonna have to like, there's a key assumption in there that it's like a lot of people are going to use this really fast, because the scale at which you need to do things before your business can be successful on like, just go and look on like a quick Google search, like go to try to like see companies that are selling data and how many data points are they giving for how much. It's like thousands for like pennies. And so it's like, okay, if that's the rate, I need to go and like, and then you have founders do this in like 3 minutes, they go, okay, I need to have 500,000 users before like I can actually make any type of real revenue from this. And they're acquiring like 2 to 3 new users a month. Okay, your business will be viable in 76 years. Like, it just really got to like figure out like what are these key assumptions that need to be true, and then you can go out and start to test them. Then you take those assumptions and you can turn them into hypotheses or actually like questions. You just newcomer families want a mentor style relationship with a coach. If we offer like newcomer families a sport, they will be interested. You just make it a question that you can actually like test. And then you can go test it. This is one way to test it. There's a lot of different ways to test it. We'll talk about more in a second. This is just a tool card where it's just like we believe that that's your hypothesis. To verify that, we will do this action. This is what the action is that I'm going to be. How are you going to measure the impact of it? This is where it's like what gets measured gets managed. So it's like you can't really compare different things if you don't have a fixed metric that you're measuring them on to be able to make objective. Ideally, you can make objective decisions and just like see like quantifiably like which ones are doing better. Do that. And then yeah, if you're right, what does that look like? So it's a good framework to like work through that and like kind of like map out what that would look like as you go to test. Also, I'll share this slide deck with Cecile so that she can pass it on. It's just a Google slide deck. And that way you can access any of this or any of the notes that are in it. So there's other ways to test that. Customer interviews, message testing wireframes, like an actual physical prototype. Like I said, in this deck, when I share it, you can go and like, we have a description of each one in the notes, but you can go through and check them. Yeah, there's like, but again, landing pages are super popular. Crowdfunding can be a good way if you have a product company. You know, those things. I started Wizard of Oz because a lot of founders, and this might apply to this group, is, you know, they're like, oh, I want to build an app that's gonna like solve this problem. I'm gonna build an app or a web platform or something along those lines. And those are really challenging. Unless you are technically skilled yourself, they are very expensive and very challenging to do. And so then what happens is founders, like, they never really get going because they just get so caught up on like, how do I actually build an app? How do I get money to build an app? How do I like get an app in people's hands? Like, apps are super tricky, like especially from any business model. Like people are real, people are over time becoming more and more like specific about like who they let like their space on their screens on their phones, and to monetize them is just a super huge challenge as well. But what you can do is a lot of times you can like the Wizard of Oz is basically, it's like, before you invest all that time, energy, and resources into like trying to build an app and do that kind of stuff, find a way to deliver whatever the app would do, but just do it behind the scenes. So I think like there's so many examples of this with like famous companies. One of them is like Uber was like, just like had a spreadsheet with like limos or something. And then they would like get these requests in, and then they would like book it with spreadsheets and do that. Or Airbnb did something similar as well. Like so many companies that we know, like where it's like, this is where the advice that we give is be an entrepreneur, not an engineer. Unless you are an engineer, then you can do this. But like be an entrepreneur. So go out and test the problem, find a way to like solve it. Even if it's like, what would take an app a minute to do is taking you 13 minutes to do manually. At least you can go and test a bunch of things and see if people are actually willing to use it and challenge it. And actually like that actually gives you way more momentum, can actually start bringing revenue in the door. It can give you way more traction, makes it easier to like get like resources, whether it's investment or winning pitch competitions or whatever it might be, to actually then fund building an app and then use an app to scale your business, right? So it's like, as an entrepreneur, your job is to understand what is the pain point, what is the problem, and can you solve it, and is there a market opportunity here, right? It's not to be the CTO. It's right. So try to remind yourself, depending on what you're building, like you want to be the entrepreneur, not the engineer, unless you have technical engineering training, and then you could do both. But that is just such a killer of so many businesses where they're like, I need to build this really expensive, like, and then either they waste a bunch of money on it and time and resources, or they try to teach themselves how to code, or they use Bubble. or whatever it is. But it's like, that's not what they're not actually doing what they set out to do, which is to solve a problem. Which you can do it in, like, this is where MVP comes in, right? So like build an MVP that doesn't involve an app, unless very few problems like actually need an app to solve it at first. There's a really good episode of how I built this with the founders of Calm or Headspace, one of the two. Forget. But one of the guys like just like left his life, one of the co-founders, it's like had left his life and went and was like a monk for 10 years. And then he came back and he was like, doing what the app does, but he was doing it with clients. He was actually just like, they were doing conferences and then they were doing workshops and then they were doing like one-on-one stuff. He was trying to find ways to take what they were doing. And then eventually it became Calm, or Headspace. I can't remember which one. I think it was Headspace. But they started off by actually like doing the service, right? So typically an app as a scale of business is not actually going to solve the problem. So that's just a really common one where we see a lot of businesses, especially youth founders, get hung up on that. And that like becomes their sole focus, is like building this super complicated tech thing, and not actually focus on the problem that they're solving and why it matters to solve it. And then after you go and you test it and you do all these different, information, and the number one question, you synthesize it, you make tests, and you test again. So you just go through this cycle, rinse and repeat. The main question we get here is, when do you stop and when do you launch your business? And the best answer I can give you there is when you can start to predict what your customers are doing on a regular basis. So it's like, before you go into it, you're like, this is exactly what they're going to say, how they're going to say it, what the reactions are going to be, right? Like the more you get better at predicting that, and it becomes like repeatable, the closer you are to understanding really what it is that customer problem, that pain point is. Like, pretty much guarantee you, the first time you do it, you write down what you think they're gonna say and how they're gonna react. It's not gonna happen. And a great example is, I built a mobile grocery store called Fresh Roots. And before we were called Fresh Roots, we were called the Community Mobile Market, because I thought that was like quite straightforward what we were doing. We were a community focused grocery store that was mobile, and it was like kind of like a market, but it was like Walmart on wheels. We're trying to bring healthy and affordable food to communities that had barriers to accessing it. And a lot of times when we went to like, especially parts of town where there's a lot of newcomers in Calgary, or even Edmonton, we were in Edmonton as well for a while. People come up to us and ask if we sold phones, because we had this big sign on the side of our truck that said Community Mobile Market, and a mobile in a lot of other countries is a phone. So a lot of people thought that we were selling phones, right? So I would have never have guessed that had I not actually like interacted like with our customers. So yeah, you go through this cycle. So I'm gonna give examples of what you're trying to get to, right? This is the goal. We'll see if you guys pinpoint like what good customer discovery work looks like. Here's example one. I've already talked about this. These are actual submissions from real entrepreneurs who have applied to our programs. They were excited and want to use our product as their top customer insight. Nothing you can do with that. That tells me nothing about you or your product or anything that you've done to talk to them. That's a 0 out of 10. Okay, example number 2. Many small businesses are successful despite inefficient processes that rely on the owner management's experience to operate smoothly. Most of the experienced people at these companies are retiring soon, and the next generation wants to prove that they can use technology to do better. Most people don't see their data. So this is a company that like was helping small business do better data analysis, was their goal. Most people don't see their data as an asset that can be leveraged and think they haven't collected any useful data on their businesses, but they have. Useful stuff in there. First 2, not so much, right? So first 2 is like, if you were to just tell me like many small businesses are successful despite inefficient processes, I'm like, yeah, like there's a lot of successful businesses that have been around for decades that don't have a huge data or like tech enabled stuff, or the government still works on fax, that kind of stuff. And it relies on the expertise, and there's a lot of handover, and that like this newer generation wants to use more tech enabled solutions to different things. Those are okay. They're not great. So like you could probably just tell me that without doing a bunch of interviews and like actually validating that. But the last one is those are interesting. A lot of people don't see data as an asset. Okay, well that's interesting, right? You can do something with that. You can like marketing and how you communicate stuff. That's like helpful, and that there's more power and leverage to them. And they don't think they haven't like. There's actually 2 or 3 insights in the last sentence that are actually good. But it was, you know, a lot of them don't think they are or have collected useful data, but they do. And there's a lot of value there. And it's like, okay, well, that's a super interesting approach that they could take and say, you probably don't think you have a lot of interesting data, but we actually like through what you're already doing, there's a lot of interesting stuff that you're already collecting that can help you like do some data analysis. So there's 2 interesting ones that are actionable and actually like kind of like an insight in the last one. First 2, not so much. Those are just like kind of just like trends that the world is seeing. More adoption of technology, older companies not adopting them as fast as newer companies. Like, okay, that's not groundbreaking. 5 out of 10. Being generous. Top 3 insights we gained from user interviews, surveys, and behaviors are: 1, users want to see what other people are investing in. So this is a company that like has like you can publicly put your investment portfolio. So it's not actually like an investment company anymore. It's more like a social media side of like investing, kind of building on the momentum and what Wealthsimple's doing, but like making it more like community based. So like Reddit meets Wealthsimple in a verified way. It's kind of what they're going for. All of our features, seeing the portfolios of all of their features, seeing the portfolios of other was rated the most valuable in our July 2022 user survey, N equals 70. These users like to explore the portfolios of others to discover new investments. Okay, there's a lot of actionable insight, and that tells me a lot about what this founder has done. Maintaining qualities of utmost importance. One of the reasons people like their company name is the high quality of opinions and insights on the platform. It's important to find ways to attract the most knowledgeable investors onto the platform and ensure their voices get amplified. He's taking the insight and showing the actionable strategic decisions that he's going to make from it, just like in the answer, right? And then number 3, there is a sweet spot to what users are willing to share. And I highlighted this one, which is users are willing to share percentages, but not dollar amounts, is an incredibly valuable insight. Because if you were to ask, like, if you were to map out his assumptions of what would, like, this relies on people sharing information about what they're investing in, is like, so it's like, instead of it just being like, and it's verified, is instead of just being like, you know, like there's like YouTube or TikTok influencers who are just giving a bunch of really bad investment advice. That is probably their biggest assumption, like critical risk, is that they are actually willing to share this information. If people are not willing to share, because people normally don't share publicly their investment information, right? And so like testing that and figuring this out was so critical, because if this wasn't true, that people are actually willing to do this, their business would have failed. And what they found though is that they are willing to share percentages, but not dollar amounts. So you could go online and see my portfolio, and you can see I have 10% in Google, 15 in Amazon, you know, 18 in Facebook, whatever it is, right? But it doesn't say, it's like it could be $5, you know, in total investment under like, you know, or it could be 5 million. You don't know, because that's too personal information. That's a really thin line that they've drawn, but they figured it out, and that's what's worked, right? And that's like, that's how people are actually using it. And they're like, wait, people are actually comfortable with this, versus the amount of people that would have been comfortable sharing the dollar amounts, a fraction. And so, and then for a subset of users, some degree of privacy will be important as they scale. So they also give you an option to show more features to hide more of your information. So if I were to ask you, so I'm going to say, let's go to Sean. Sean, out of these 3 companies, example 1, 2, or 3, who would you invest in?
The third one.
Right?
Yeah.
You see the power, right? Like you see the power of good, like you don't even have to launch a business. You can go and figure all this out with no overhead, no cost, no product development, anything, right? And there's so many ways you can do that. So a lot of founders were great. We have founders who created like fake dashboards. Like they said this is what their product looked like, but it was, they just used Canva. Like it wasn't a thing. And they sent it to a bunch of like target customers being like, this is what our dashboard looks like. It's so much better. Would you want to switch? And then they got like a bunch of positive feedback. They're like, okay, now we're going to go build this because like we were able to test like there's so many like things that you can do to really like verify this stuff and do that beforehand. And like learning these types of things before you invest a bunch of time and money, right, achieves a lot of things. So like what is this actually doing by doing this stuff? Let's go back to like, why should you care? Ready for some like early 2000s animation? See if it works. It's so embarrassing if it doesn't. External validation, right? You never want to deal with a founder who's only ever like been in their own head and think their product's great and hasn't actually showed it to anybody or like had target users or done that. Really look for external validation when we're looking at business. It was ventures, excuse me. You're looking for actionable strategic customer insights, right? And that's like things that actually are helpful for you as a founder to make decisions that you're going to need to be able to make your product work. You start to understand your customer channels better, right? So you understand your customer better, how you're going to interact with them, how you market it, what words you use, how that all like plays together, right? It's going to reduce your risk and save you money in the long run. It's way easier to do it as an interview than it is to like try to sell your product and then learn these things. You can address your founder biases and blind spots. It can be really great for partnership building and increase credibility. So if you want to raise money or get into certain programs or do pitch competitions or things like that, this shows, again, target audience and what you're doing matters, but like this really gives you a lot of credibility in like you know what you're talking about and you've tested it, right? The fact that he used N70, right? Like the detail, it matters, right? So it's not like he went and interviewed 3 people and got that insight. He interviewed 70 people before they, right? And sharing that information in your insights whenever you're talking about this and pitching or partnerships or whatever it is, talking about your business, is really important because it gives you just a lot of like credibility and makes partnership building a lot easier. And like it's like partnership and relationship management is like 90% of building a company. And then yeah, guaranteed it will save you a ton of future headaches and problems. There's no way it can't. All it'll do is just build your confidence. Like let's say you go and every assumption that you thought was correct, all that, all it'll do is build your confidence in what you're doing and that you know it's right, and you'll remove some of that doubt. So there really is no way that this is like negative. And it's way easier to do it the earlier you do it. So the end up tools that you end up doing are yeah, you build a user journey map. That can be a key aspect of it. You have your spreadsheet map, mapping out your assumptions, you design them, and then you track the insights in the interviews. And then hopefully you record them to get some of those additional insights on, that can be important for future marketing and how you describe and build your company. So I'm going to leave you with, we're going to go to one thought of the day. This is just I pulled up from somebody I follow on LinkedIn. I've invested in 170 companies, and the ones that win have the fastest feedback loops. They try lots, they fail fast, they learn faster. The ones that lose have long feedback loops. It takes months to know if something worked. The faster you fail, the quicker you learn. So the faster you can go out and test all of these things, the faster you can build those loops. I think Aaron, this is a quote from Aaron's favorite podcast, which is Idea to Startup. If you want a really good podcast, it's like the best founders aren't the ones with the best ideas. They're not the ones with they're not savants. Sometimes people just get lucky. That happens where they just like face a personal problem in their life and they're like, I want to do something about it. And it just so happens that there's a major market opportunity out there that we see that. It still takes skill and everything to and confidence to execute on it. But a lot of times we see founders find their ideas that way. But the best founders take the most shots. That is universal across anybody who works with hundreds of entrepreneurs. The best founders take the most shots that are intentional, and they measure the response and the impact and the intended impact that they wanted. and then they use that information to try again, and they just take more shots, and they're just faster. And they're more iterative when they do that. That's the best founders are the best at that. And those are the founders where like we have founders like that in our community where if they're like, I'm starting a business, I would give them all of my life savings, like without even knowing what their business is. Because I just know, like, I believe in their abilities as an entrepreneur. I don't believe that they'll have the idea to start, but I would just be like, yeah, sure, I'll invest. I don't even need to know what it is because I know them as individuals and I know how they approach these things. And this is what they're good at. And so getting really good at that is like key to success. So now we'll skip this for now because we're running out of time. It's just a video that explains like how do you do this? So y'all share the thing. You go like, how do you approach these things? Like to say it's like a first date when you do customer interviews. If you just talk about yourself the whole time, it's not going to go very well, right? So you have to make it about them and their problems and the solution. And then we're going to skip this. Questions. I'll stop sharing it now.
So, Rob, while the students are writing their questions in the chat, maybe I could ask you a quick one. I couldn't help but notice that the age limit was 30 on that one slide. Is that accurate? And I could have swore it was 25. Did you guys change it?
It is 30, and it's ish. So the reason why I think it's 25 is because our labs program is 25, which is our programs go. It used to be called Foundations, is now called Launch It, and then it goes Labs, and then Boost. There's like 3 programs that we run right now. And Labs, it's 50% or more of your co-founding team is 25 or under. But like we have co-founding teams that are like 25, 26 in that program as well. Like it's just a rough guideline because we're just trying to get founders at roughly the same stage in doing that. So, and then with our Boost program, it's 50% or more of the co-founding team is 30 or under. There's like founders that are like 30 and 31, and you know, so just trying to get founders that are at a similar stage of doing that, like, and kind of building similar businesses, or it's just like we're taking a similar approach to entrepreneurship. That makes sense, where it's not like, oh, I have 10 years of experience in an industry and now I'm going to go and like create this little niche like service consultancy thing or whatever it might be. It's like they're trying to build an emerging brand and build a company. And so we're looking for generally founders that are like younger are doing that because they don't have a decade of experience to like give them credibility as an individual. So they have to build a company. So that's kind of why we have those.
Okay. And I don't see any questions yet, so I'm going to keep going if that's cool. Can you describe the different program? Oh, do we, Cecile? Sorry.
Yeah, we have a question from Andrew.
Angela has a question.
Oh, I apologize. Go ahead.
So in order to get into like the what was that program called for like 25 and under? It was like the labs, yeah. In order to get into that, like what stage of the company does it have to be at in order to get accepted? Because I applied, but like they said mine was like too early of a stage.
Yeah.
So like what would you be looking for?
My best advice for that one is to go through the launch when we launch it. When we relaunch Foundations as Launch It, is what we did is we took all of the questions that we asked in our so those examples, for example, are from actually the content that we wrote for Launch It. Because what we did is we took the questions that we ask in our applications and we took all of the ones that are like more like about your business, they're not like data questions. And for each of the questions, we broke it down into 5 different levels. And then for each level, we have there's like 3 or 4 questions in each level. And we take that question, we say, why do we ask it and what are we looking for? Like, what do good examples look like? And how can you, like, what are good resources to go learn more about, like, more the applied side, right? Like, what do good answers look like? What mistakes do we see? Like, how can you answer this question better? How do you do it well? And we give examples of different examples of answers that are good examples. And then we share resources, so like good links to videos or other websites or things if you want to learn more about it. And then we have like an online course. We like modules to it. So we do that for each question. And so then what you can do is you can go through and like do each level, and then you submit, like when you're done level 1, you go through, you read all that, you look at your answers, you understand like, okay, I gotta go do more of this work. I gotta understand this better. I gotta do this. And then you submit your actual answers to what those your responses to those questions. And then we send you individualized feedback on those answers and like what we'd be looking for. And so you can actually just work your way through. And then what we do is if you make it through all 5 levels, we guarantee you an interview for the labs program. So that'd be my advice if you want to get into labs, is to do that. The answer to your question is we are looking for traction and external validation. That's what we're looking for. So for a product company, it's like you've launched your product, right? Like you have people interacting with it, you're doing that kind of stuff. With medtech, it's different, right? So it's kind of hard to say specifically what it is, but we're looking for founders that have gone out and done some of the work that we're describing today, and then actually went and built it and have tested it, right? Like it's not necessarily revenue that we're looking for, but we're looking for a few of those cycles have happened, where you've like put it out into the world, learned some things, put it out into the world, like adjust and strategize and put it out, and then like have at least done that a couple times.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
Just got to run to another meeting, so I'm going to head out now. Thank you.
All right, it's great to meet you. Thanks, Angela. Any other last questions before we wrap up?
Looks like not. So thank you so much for joining us today, Rob. Really appreciate you and Aaron joining us and helping our students work through this and understand. And I think the examples helped a lot to sort of see how, if you get very specific, it really helps.
Yeah.
So
that's our like our secret sauce to our stuff is we really try to bring that applied and stuff to it, because you want to see where, like, if you do this well, where does it get you, and then have that be the goal, because then you can see it, like how valuable it is to have that and what decisions you can make from there. And so it's something that we're working on doing more of.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you. There's only a couple students left here, but thank you guys for coming in today. And remember, Dale's got your back. So you've got questions, reach out to him, and then do check out League of Innovators as well for when you're done the program.
Absolutely.
Have a great weekend.
Thanks, everybody.